Greetings and welcome to this relatively short beginner's guide for the monk class for Final Fantasy XIV Stormblood. Now in this relatively quick video we are going to go over the general weapon skill combos that you're going to be using throughout basically the entire career as a monk, the abilities that you want to put in between your weapon skills to increase your damage, the best way to open a fight, give or take, because the exact opinions vary from person to person, and how you're going to be fighting as a monk in general, whether outside, leveling yourself, or in a group in raid, or in a dungeon, and so on and so forth. So, let's get into it, shall we? Now, the very first time you log in as a monk, or you put on a monk's weapon, you're going to get this little window here. Now, this little window, which is the active help, which you probably turned off the first time you got into a class, goes over in general how forms work and what about grease lighting. Now, the most important part is this one, page 2. As you can see, it says that many pugilist weapon skills will either change your form upon execution or require you to be in a certain form to execute. There are also weapon skills which grant damage bonuses when executed in a certain form. And the three forms are Raptor, Koero, and Oppo Oppo. Now, what does this mean? That's exactly what it says it means. Now, the forms go exactly in that order, but not exactly. What do we mean by this? So let's turn that off and actually go into our skills. Now, this is the very first skill you're going to get at level 1 as a monk. Well, as a pugilist, technically, that then turns into monk. Now, as you can see there, it does decent damage. However, the important part is that it says right there, Oppo Oppo form bonus. Now, what does this mean? It means that you need to be into that form in order to allow it to have a critical damage if dealt from the rear. Now, how do you get into a form? Now, as you can see right there near the bottom, it says changes form to Raptor. As we read in the active help, that is technically the first form we have access to, even though it's technically the second form in a chain, I guess you could say. But anyway, that is how literally every weapon skill for the monk works. They have three things. One, they have a form requirement to either be used or to do their bonus effect or their bonus damage. They have a positional requirement for that bonus effect or bonus damage, and they switch your form to the next in the sequence. So just by that, you can automatically guess that it is a type of infinite loop of combination of skills per se. So the weapon skills are always you're going to use one that has a bonus in Oppo Oppo, like Bootshine here, and it will switch you to Raptor. Then you're going to use another skill that benefits from Raptor, and that will switch you to Koero. And then you will use one that benefits from Koero, and it will switch you to Oppo Oppo, which puts you back at the beginning of the sequence, and you repeat onto whatever it is you're attacking is dead. So let's go over the skills that you're going to be using, the two that you will probably not be using at all, and then we'll go over all the neat little things we got in Stormblood and show you how to use them, shall we? So, as you can see here, we've been hovering over it. Bootshine is your bread and butter. You basically start with this, and you will always have it, and the damage is okay, especially if you can get the guaranteed critical from the back, although later on you'll see that it is definitely something that can be improved upon when it combined with some other abilities. But anyway, you need to be behind and in Oppo Oppo form in order to be able to land a critical hit from behind. However, because you don't get the Snap Punch until level 6, which really shouldn't take you that long, you're not going to have that form until level 6, so there's really not much you can do, so just run up to something and hit it. Then at level 4, you're going to get True Strike. Now, oddly enough, this is our hardest hitting ability that is part of our weapon skill combinations. Now, we do have a couple other skills that hit slightly harder or very hard. However, those are abilities and not weapon skills. And I am talking about Forbidden Chakra and Tornado Kick. However, one of those is not used, and one of those became extremely important to us in Stormblood, and I'll tell you those when we get there. Now, at level 6, Snap Punch. Now this at level 6 is the first and most important skill you're going to get because it is the first skill that will let you stack Greased Lightning, which is the special buff for the monk. Now, Greased Lightning, as you can see right there, it gives you, a buff literally that increases damage damage by 10% and your basically all weapon skill and auto attack and ability haste by 5%. Now, the important part is that as you go up in levels, you're going to be able to stack 2 and 3 of these effects at the same time. That means at max level, once you get all 3 stats going, you have a 30% damage buff and a 50% haste buff on pretty much everything you do. So that alone starts making it worth it, and that is really what the entire dance of the weapon skills for the monk is focused on. It's keep your Grease Lightning stacks, which are over here. Well, I put them there at least. Make sure they're up the entire time. And make sure you also keep the rest of your buffs and debuffs on the target. Now, what other skills do we have aside from those three? This is your basic damage combination. Boot Shine into True Strike into Snap Punch. That's your basic damage. However, we have another one which involves Dragon Kick, Twin Snakes, and Demolish. So let's go over those. Now, Dragon Kick delivers an attack with 100, however, 140 when done from the flank. That does not have any requirements, so always hit it from the flank whether you're in a form or not. Now, if you're in Oppo form, it reduces the target's blunt resistance by 10%. And that is the important part here, because monks are the only class in the game that hints with blunt attacks. And because of that, we are the only ones that are able to apply this debuff, so it falls to us to make sure it is up on the target at all times. Otherwise, our damage will go down by, I'm going to assume 10%-ish. Now, something else? Yeah, it switches to Raptor, just like Boot Shine. So every ability that has a bonus from Oppo will switch you to Raptor. Every ability that uses Raptor will switch you to Coero, and so on and so forth. And you get the idea on how it works. So as you can see, the way I set up my skills here makes a lot of sense based on that. So these are the ones, well, ignore these two. These four here, well, these two use Oppo, these two use Raptor, and these three use Coero. So if you want to make your life easier, you can erase them like that as well. Now, Twin Snakes. At level 18, you get your first very strong buff. So 130 when executed from the flank, you need to be in Raptor form in order to use it, which is very easy because any of these two attacks switch you to it, and it gives you a 10% damage buff for 15 seconds. Not bad for an ability that deals decent damage. 130 is not the highest, but it's definitely not too bad. And then, of course, it switches us to Coero form. Now, this is where we get another one here, which is Demolish. You get this at the end of the Pugilist line before you turn into a monk. Now, this is our only damage over time effect, and as you can see, it has very weak damage, 30 and 70 when it's from the rear. However, the damage over time effect is relatively strong at 50 potency, and it lasts 18 seconds, so that's not too bad. Now, it also switches us to Oppo and grants us Grease Lightning. Now, as you can pretty much guess right now, that is basically the order in things go. You start with this, go into this, and then this, and gain a stack of Grease Lightning. Now, there are ways to accelerate the acquisition of Grease Lightning later on in the game as you go up in levels, but that is generally the gist of it. Once you get all 6 of the skills at level 30, it's basically going to be start the fight with either Boot Shine or Dragon Kick, go into Twin Snakes because you want to get this buff, and then go into Demolish in order to start applying it. And then, because you're going to be an Oppo, if you can stun the target to get behind them, or they're doing a big area ability that has a wind-up, you get behind them, go into Boot Shine, go into True Strike, and then go into Snap Punch for damage, and then repeat this one over here, and then repeat this one down here, and repeat. That is our basic weapon skill combination cycle. Now, there is another one up here that I use, and that is Rockbreaker, which you also get at level 30. Now, there are 2 more abilities I'm going to go over, but this is the technically final ability that I find any use for. Now, as you can see, it delivers an attack with a potency of 130 to all enemies in a cone in front of you. That is very useful for dealing with big packs of things, especially later on in dungeons. Now, it also changes us to Oppo and also grants us Grease Lightning. So that is by far, as you can see, very nice in terms of these 3 skills. Now, I did mention 2 other skills that I am not using because I find it completely useless. And those are Arm of the Destroyer and One Ill Punch. Now let's go over them and show you why they are technically useless. A potency of 50 to all nearby enemies. Now that is not particularly good, and the fact that it costs 130 means it's really not that good. If you compare it to Rockbreaker, Rockbreaker deals 130 potency. This one only 50. Not particularly good, is it? Now, what if you use it in Oppo? Well, it silences everybody it hits for 1 second. That is not even particularly useful either. 1 second silence on mobs in a dungeon doesn't really mean that much, because they are not living or dying by the spells they cast. So stopping them from casting a fireball for 1 second really isn't going to help that much. Now, the final one, One Ill Punch. Delivers an attack with 120, that's okay. And when used, it'll have a stun. Now, the important thing about this one is that stun is impervious to stun nullifying effects. Now, what does this mean? Now, I have never met a mob outside or in a dungeon or in a raid that is immune to stun by an effect. That means that this is technically only useful in PvP, at least the stun effect. So as you can see, because it only works in PvP from what I can gather, I stopped using it altogether. So these two abilities, I'm the Destroyer and One Nil Punch, I stopped using because of those reasons that I just said. Now, what about other abilities that I have been mentioning that aren't weapon skills? Well, these abilities are going to be used in between the cast time between our weapon skills, because as we can see, 2.38 recast time on all of our weapon skills, and they share it. So in those 2.3 seconds that we are not doing anything, we are going to use at least one of these abilities to fill in that time. Now, the first one we get, I believe, is Steel Peak at level 38. Yes. So Steel Peak, just 150 potency attack, very quick. It's very quick. It's very short range, so you're going to be using it a lot. After that, yes, we get Shoulder Tackle. Now, if you come from World of Warcraft, you can imagine this as the charge for the warrior. It's basically the same thing, except this one actually does damage. However, at endgame, once we get another ability, this is going to deal more damage if we are in a certain form for the monk, not these forms, but a certain stance, which are over here. We'll go over those in a little bit. And his damage is going to go up. So you're going to be using this as a damage filler in between, as something to fill between abilities while you do something else. So that's going to be like a damaging ability, and you can also use it to close the distance to the boss if you need to get there quickly. Now, we also have Elixir Field, or actually Howling Fist first. 210 potency to enemies in a line in front of you. Definitely not too bad. It's relatively quick and flashy. I'll show it to you later. Then, Elixir Field. 220 damage to all nearby enemies. Another big AoE and another decent cooldown that we can use in between weapon skills. So by now, you can probably figure out what the combination is. So, as an example, start with Snap Punch. Once the weapon skills go on cooldown, use Howling Fist, then go into True Strike, then into Elixir Field, into Snap Punch, into Steel Peak, into Dragon Kick for the debuff, into Shoulder Tackle, into Twin Snakes, and from that point on, it's use any of these abilities as soon as they come off cooldown. Like literally every single one, as soon as it comes off cooldown, you use it. Otherwise, you're wasting time and DPS. Now, there is another ability that becomes extremely important, especially here in Stormblood, and that is this. Now, Meditation itself is not actually a useful ability. As you can see, it says, opens a chakra, up to 5 chakra can be opened at once, shares a recast timer with all other weapon skills. That is the problem here. Now, what does this do? Well, if we decide to use it, like so, you can see that we gain 1 chakra. So we need to charge up 5 chakra before we can actually do anything with them. Now that we have 5, we finally have access to Forbidden Chakra, which is what Square Enix decided to focus on most of our abilities here in Stormblood. Now let's read it. Delivers an attack with a potency of 250. Can only be executed while under the effect of the 5th chakra, as we just mentioned. And the problem is the 5 chakras disappear when we use it. Now you're starting to get the reason why you're not really going to use outside of Stormblood, or at least outside of dungeons. And the reason is because while fighting something, having to stay still and charge up chakra for 8 seconds is not really fun or actually useful to anybody in the dungeon group, now is it? So the solution to that came in Stormblood later. If we go into our abilities and we go into into traits, here we go. At level 62, we get Deep Meditation. Grants a 50% chance that a chakra will open upon dealing critical damage with a weapon skill. Now things are starting to get interesting because the critical strikes we land with our weapon skills will have a chance to open one for us. That means once you get to level 62, just by questing around, your chakras will slowly build up and you can use Forbidden Chakra basically as soon as it comes up. Now in dungeons this becomes even more important once we get something at level 70. But we'll go to that in a little bit. We're not done yet with our separate skills. Now at level 60, we get Tornado Kick. Now, delivers an attack with a potency of 330, can only be executed while under the effect of Greased Lightning 3, and just like Chakra, effect fades upon execution. Now, this means that the most important thing about Monk, which is Greased Lightning, goes away after you use its most powerful ability, which is Tornado Kick. That sounds a little contradictory, doesn't it? And it absolutely is. It's because of this reason that Tornado Kick is not used in our damage rotation at all. So if we don't use it at all, then what is it used for? Well, based on my experience and from what I've read up, The only reason you use Tornado Kick is if the boss is about to become immune to damage for one reason or another, and you're going to lose your Grease Lightning stacks anyway. So that means if the boss is about to go into a part, let's say leaves the arena and bombards you with something, that means you use Tornado Kick to get rid of your Grease Lightning stacks before they go away on their own. That way you don't waste them. That is its literally only use. Or if you are about to need to kill something very fast and it's almost dead. Now, time to go over the Stormblood ability, shall we? So, job. The first thing actual ability you're going to get in Stormblood is Riddle of Earth. So let's read it and see if you can figure out what you use it for. Grants Fist of Earth. Also grants Earth Reply if damage is taken while active. Easy enough to understand. The duration of Earth Reply is 30 seconds. Extends Grease Lightning duration to maximum when triggered. That's not too bad. And reduces damage taken by 10%, duration 30 seconds. So what does this do? When activated, you will 1. Go into Fist of Earth, which reduces damage taken by 10% right off the bat. You get it at level 15. And if you take damage while active, it will give you a buff that will also reduce damage by another 10%. So it doubles the effectiveness of Fist of Earth, so that's not too bad. Now, if you get hit and it activates, it will extend the duration of Grease Lightning to maximum, which is 16 seconds. It's kind of a way so that when what happens that we just mentioned, where a boss is about to do a big AoE and you can't hit him, you can hopefully extend the duration of your Grease Lightning so that by the time the boss comes back, you still have them. A bit tricky to figure out, especially on certain bosses, but that's just something a little extra to throw on there. Now, another trait at 66. Tackle Mastery. This is the one that I told you that will change your tackle depending on what you did. Now, if we go over the job, we can actually see all 3 tackles down here. So, as you can see, the tackle we get depends on which one of the stances that we pick to choose we are in. Fist of Wind you really only use when you're trying to get around or catch up with people in a dungeon. Fist of Earth is what you get most of the time for leveling, and Fist of Fire, 5% extra damage. Now, that 5% extra damage does not seem that important. However, remember that we are getting 30% extra from our Grease Lightning, 10% from our Twin Snakes, and extra approximate 10% because of the debuff we applied with Dragon Kick, and then add on to that that adds up to what, 55% approximate extra damage between everything? That is definitely not too bad, so trying to keep this up in dungeons is definitely your choice. Now, not only that, if we switch to this, you will see that our tackle has switched to Fire Tackle. Rushes target and delivers an attack with a potency of 130. Now, the regular tackle is only 100, so it gains 30 damage. The stun is still there, and that's really the only thing that happens. This is why I said that you should learn to incorporate Fire Tackle in between your weapon skills to increase your damage. Now let's go over the other ones. Fists of Earth. 10 yalm knockback plus the stun. Really not that useful, honestly. I have never been in a situation where I need to knock back something, honestly. So to that extent, it might be useful in PvP. I'm not too sure. Finally, Fists of Wind. As we can see, this grants Riddle of Wind, and as we saw over here, Riddle of Wind is a second tackle. So as you can see, by going into the tray for Tackle Mastery, there we can see in the middle, immediately second tackle damage halved. So what does this mean? This means that Fist of Wind with Wind Tackle is more of a mobility spell than anything else. For example, if you're fighting in PvP against somebody that's running away like a Dragoon or something, you can tackle them, and then if they run away again, you can tackle them yet again. That is his main purpose, honestly. Now, in PvE and dungeons, I have found very little use for this because if you're trying to get away from an AoE, chances are that it is coming from the boss, and rushing to the boss will not get you out of it. So yeah, stay in Fists of Fire whenever you're doing PvE content in dungeons or raids. Now, those are the main abilities here. However, we did skip over a few. Now, by far one of the most important ones is Form Shift that we get at level 52. As you can see, shift your current form to the next in the sequence. If no formula is being used, when executed, you will move into Oppo form. So this is your best way to prepare yourself for the upcoming boss fight or regular fight, depending on what you want to do. Now, by far the most important thing you can do is use it 1, use it 2, and obviously use it 3 times so that you can use any of your abilities that grant you Grease Lightning right off the bat in the fight. That is its main use. Now, you could technically use it once to be able to start with the reduces target's blunt resistance by 10% debuff, but honestly, you should always be starting with any of either Rockbreaker, Demolish, or Snap Punch at the beginning of a fight. Now, one of the final abilities we are missing here is Perfect Balance at level 50. Now, this is a very interesting ability because it lets you use any weapon skill without having to be in the form that requires it, and it will also grant the bonus ability and damage as if you were in that form. However, when you use a weapon skill while under Perfect Balance, you will not switch forms. That is the important part that is not told to you by the ability. So that means if you are, let's say, going into a very big pack of a bunch of dogs and you want to do a lot of AoE, you can trigger Perfect Balance and then spam Rockbreaker anywhere between 5 or 6 times to start the damage and get your Grease Lightning up very quickly. However, in endgame, that is not something you're going to be using. You're going to be using Perfect Balance to quickly get your Grease Lightning, and then you're going to be going into a separate rotation in order to get your maximum damage out, use all of your abilities, and have them go on cooldown so that everything is ready. Now, with all that said and done, how about we put it into practice, huh? Let's see, how do we get down from here? This way. Here we go, to the target dummies. So obviously, the first thing you want to make sure is that you have your 5 stacks of Chakra ready. Remember that you can use meditation whenever you want in order to stack them. Now, how are we going to start this fight? Well, like we just mentioned, we want to start from the rear, so that we start the fight with Demolish, after shifting form 3 times so that we can use it. After that, we are going to use Snap Punch 2 times. That way we have our 3 stacks of Grease Lightning ready. Then, after that, because we're already on the side, we're going to go into Dragon Kick to apply our blunt resistance debuff, yes, that. And then lastly into Twin Snakes to get our last damage buff. By that time, Perfect Balance is going to be about to go away or just went away. And from that moment, things get interesting because at that moment, we are going to trigger Internal Release, which you get at level 10, which is very powerful. Then you're going to trigger our level 68 ability, Riddle of Fire, and our level 70 ability, Brotherhood. Now, what is Riddle of Fire and Brotherhood? Well, Riddle of Fire, quite frankly, is our best ability right now, and it increases our damage by 30%, while increasing, not decreasing, our recast time for weapon skills by 15%. Also switches us to Fist of Fire for some reason. Now, what does this mean? This means that we will get a flat 30% damage amplification buff, but we are going to essentially lose the 15% haste that we are getting from the Grease Lightning. So we're going to be attacking with normal speed, but we're going to hit very, very hard. Now, our level 70 ability Brotherhood does something very interesting. It increases the physical damage dealt by nearby party members, not including you by the way, by 5%. This includes tanks and anyone else that deals physical damage. Now, also grants a 30% chance of opening a chakra when party members under the effect of Brotherhood execute a weapon skill. Now, this means that anybody around you hitting the boss for physical damage has a chance of helping you open a chakra so you can use Forbidden Chakra more often. Now, combine this with your Deep Meditation passive that makes it so your weapon skill critical strikes have a chance of opening one yourself. You can see why, during this weapon skill opening combination, we are going to use Internal Release with Riddle of Fire with Brotherhood. Now, the important part here is that Riddle of Fire and Brotherhood both have a 90-second cooldown, so you're always going to be using these together, especially in a raid and in a group. Now, let's see if we can actually put this into practice, shall we? So remember, we're going to start with Demolish, 2 Snap Punches, then Dragon Kick, Twin Snakes, then activate this along with this, and then continue the rotation. Now remember that once we get our 3 stacks of Grease Lightning, we are going to be basically set. However, because we want to get our damaging abilities on cooldown, once we start with Demolish, we are going to use the Forbidden Chakra right off the bat and then go down the ladder with the rest of our abilities. So let's give it a try, shall we? Are we in Fist of Fire? Yes, we are. That's 2. Okay, let's give this a try. So, start there, start with that, go to this, go to that, go to that, go to this, then into that, into this, into Twin Snakes, into this, and then into this, into this, into this. There we go. And then all we gotta do now is keep our debuffs up on the target at all times, keep our buffs up on us, and from this point on, it becomes a repeat this rotation over and over until the thing is dead. Now, as you can see, we have slowly opened 3 chakras by ourselves. If we had party members with us, we would probably be ready for another one, but we are not, unfortunately. And this right here that you are seeing is the standard rotation that you would do after you begin your damage rotation on the boss. There's Steel Peak ready, and go into Demolish. Here we go. So yeah, here we go. Use Forbidden Chakra as soon as it comes off cooldown, or it's ready. Use anything as soon as it comes off cooldown. And that is your basic rotation for the monk. Now, it sounds a little bit more complicated than it is, but as you're leveling up the monk, you're going to start getting more abilities, and you'll get used to using them as soon as they come off cooldown, especially if you're leveling in Pass of the Dead, where it's everything goes rush, 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 get to the end and level up. So you're going to have a lot of chance to use a lot of these abilities. Now, I did mention a Tornado Kick, so let's see what that does, shall we? So as you can see, that hit for around 8,300 and something, but it removed Riot Grease Lightning. So that is why we don't use the Tornado Kick at all, which is a little unfortunate because it looks very cool, but the fact that it removes Grease Lightning is very unfortunate. But yes, that is the Monk Beginner's Guide, technically. We went over our basic abilities, with the order that you want to use them, our damaging abilities, and how you can put them in between your weapon skills. I believe that is called weaving them in between your weapon skills. We went over our Stormblood abilities, which are Riddle of Fire, Brotherhood, Riddle of Earth, and a couple of passives. We went over our stances that you get as a pugilist. And we also went over Form Shift, which is very important, and Perfect Balance. And yeah, that is the Monk. Hopefully you actually find this useful. If I was beginning along, I hope I would find this useful. And if you have any questions, concerns, or basically any comments, feel free to put it in the comment section. I am not an expert by any means. If I said something wrong, or if I have something that is related to misinformation or something that I did not go over, feel free to tell me. I do read all the comments, so by the way. So yeah, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.